We're going to get started. If others trickle in, feel free. That's totally fine. You guys are obviously here, so they didn't hear it if they are going to be trickling in. But hopefully you guys are excited for this. We're both excited about presenting this to y'all. I know a lot of these times these camps are more focused on kind of tech and integrations and Drupal, and this will be kind of hopefully a refresher for people that are C-level suites, small to medium-sized agencies that are looking to grow the business, startups, any way that you guys can kind of wedge your way in to get new business and prospects and get that pipeline full. That's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. I do highly encourage you guys to keep your phones out if you'd like. Take as many pictures as you want and notes and things like that as you want. That's totally fine with me. It's not going to hurt my feelings one bit. Thank you. Ooh, I got a new toy, huh? Thank you. All right, so with that said, I'll kind of kick it off to Harrison to introduce himself.
Yeah, so I'm Harrison. I head up the new business team at Elevated Third.
Yep, and I work underneath Harrison as a BD specialist, and kind of our roles within the organization is kind of traveling quite a bit, doing conferences like this, going and seeing prospective clients and kind of trying to get there first. Our kind of mantra is speed to lead, so him and I travel quite a bit to different clients and different organizations to try to share their thoughts and get their problems figured out based on our services and things. And this is going to be for anyone that wants to do any feedback. I think this is part of kind of what MidCamp wanted us to put in, so that's why this would be probably one of the most boring slides I have. But if you guys wanted to provide any feedback, it would be very helpful for Harrison and I to kind of go back and make sure that these things are tweaked and everything's getting hit on that you guys wanted to talk about today.
Yeah. So I'll just talk a little bit about why we're here today and why we wanted to share some of this information. So, what we wanted to kind of talk about is, sales is really the lifeblood of any organization, right? If you can't bring in new opportunities, you can't provide any services and ultimately get paid and keep your lights on. So, if you're not really committed to sales, it doesn't just kind of happen for you. It's very easy, especially I think in sort of the, early years within a company's life, where you're juggling a million things. You're kind of figuring out what is our core product offering, or what are our services, or what are we trying to accomplish, or who are we, to kind of just push sales aside and say, well, we'll figure that out when we'll figure it out. And I'm here to talk about why I think that's not a good idea. And also, sales can be really hard, right? You have to really convince someone to put their job on the line with you. People are risking budgets. There's a lot that is measured in terms of success for someone's particular position or for an organization. And when you're committing to work with someone, you're really committing to work with a group of individuals, not just, hey, I want to work with Drupal, or I want to work with the team that does this kind of integration. You're saying, I want to work with you guys to help me solve my problems. So there's a lot of complexity. It's kind of a risky time when you're in the sales process. And if you don't work at it, you won't just close new business. One of the things to talk about is we've been there. It was really hard when we kind of took a good hard look, and we're going to go into details about how we did that. Kind of what our sales process looked like, and what we were investing in, and what we were measuring, and kind of all those things. But we are not immune to challenges by any means still today. As we've grown as a company, we've seen a lot more, we've learned a lot more. I think we've improved our process, but we're still changing every day and trying to get better. It's we're going to go in a little more detail about kind of where we came from. So Elevated Third is a Drupal specific agency, so that is the only CMS platform that we work with. We were founded 15 years ago, and it was basically one guy for a couple of months in a room, and then it was two people for a while. We started in 2004, and each year I think we've progressed a lot. That doesn't mean that every year was more successful than the last, but it means that there's been a steady investment, both money, time, and effort as well, in all the things that need to happen in the sales process in order to survive in the landscape. I mean, I'm sure everyone's seen the different slides that people have that show you just how many digital agencies there are right now. People measure them different ways. Some people say there's 5,000, 15,000. The point is just it's incredibly competitive, and if you don't work at your craft, if you don't hone it, it's not going to just happen for you. Just a little bit about us. So myself and Brett are based in our Denver office, which is where our headquarters are. But we also have two offices outside of Denver, which we opened last year, one in Raleigh, North Carolina, and one in Seattle. And these are just some of the clients that we work with. it's been, again, a long journey to get here. This didn't just happen overnight, but just to give you a sense of some of the people that we partner with and some of the people who are in our kind of portfolio. These are just kind of some of our key accounts. But we did not just wake up one day and suddenly, you're working with Comcast. We had to really fight to get to where we are. So I'm going to talk about how we got to where we are and kind of what that journey looked like. So a little bit about myself. So I actually joined the company back in 2012 as a project manager. So I didn't start on the sales side. That was not my background at the time, but I kind of saw an opening and I never worked with Drupal before. I just wanted to learn the business and take some time to kind of get up to speed. And when I saw an opening kind of on the sales side of the business, I kind of asked our CEO, hey, do you mind if I jump in and try to give that a shot? So decided to make that move about 6 months into my time at Elevated Third. And so when I started, the sales process was completely different. So really, our CEO was doing a lot of the work himself. It was him juggling, trying to manage different teams, trying to figure out the strategy of the business, trying to do all the things that a CEO has to do, while also trying to figure out, well, how do we get new business in the door? So we were kind of all over the place, and that's when I kind of stepped in and sort of started as a support role to him, and then kind of branched out, and he sort of took a step back from a lot of the new business. So what I decided when I first started was, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? And what I wanted to do was trying to focus on trying to change what was in place and sort of take a good hard look at sort of what was happening. So that's kind of where I started and where I kind of started to dip my toe in the water. And kind of what happened was we sort of focused on this process. So we took some time to just say, okay, let's look at this as a time of change. Let's take a good hard look at everything that we're doing, and let's try to bring in a more holistic approach at how new business drives the organization. So for basically, from that point on, we've just continued to do that. But this was sort of the first point. It was an inflection point in the history of the organization where we just said, okay, let's stop everything and let's talk about it and let's kind of figure it out together. So the first thing I realized when I stepped in was I could not manage all of the things that were happening in terms of opportunities. And by that, I mean, we were just struggling to stay afloat with deals that were completely reactive, right? And that was not a good thing. It wasn't staying afloat because we were inundated with great opportunities. It was that we were inundated with just opportunities. And so that means like we were using tools to scrape RFPs and to bring all this stuff to us. And what I realized was that was not the right way to approach it. All my time basically was spent responding to RFPs that were kind of generic, right? They were blind. We didn't have an inside track. Sometimes they mentioned Drupal, sometimes they didn't. They took forever. They were painful. I'm sure everyone in this room has touched a really horrible RFP at least at one time in their life, and it was horrible. And so we also were doing a lot of word of mouth, but we were chasing everything that someone would refer to us, right? We were kind of scared that like if we didn't do someone a favor, that we would be blacklisted, right? And it was something wouldn't be or would be a mark against us. So even if we knew something wasn't a good fit, if it was a referral, we still pursued it and we went after it. And we were just chasing a ton of stuff. We were trying to be a million things to a million people. So in the same week, I could be touching your kind of here's a quick basic marketing site, and here's one for an enterprise opportunity, here's one for a nonprofit, here's one for higher ed. We kind of just chased them all. The bottom line is that we didn't spend real time in the sales process qualifying opportunities. If it had one element of a good opportunity, we just said, okay, great, let's do it. And how do we do it? So one of the things that I did kind of as we were going through this process, I read a book that I thought was really helpful and I highly recommend. It's called Let's Get Real or Let's Not Play. And it's kind of about that qualifying process. And there was sort of this one moment in the book where it was a watershed moment for me, where they talk about what they call yellow lights, right? So when you're driving and you see a yellow light, most of the time you hit the gas and you speed right through it. What you're supposed to do is slow down and eventually stop when you hit the red light. And so what we identified was sort of those yellow lights in our sales process, right? What are the things when we hear it, we're kind of just sweeping it under the rug and saying, but there's this other good part, or hey, they said this. what we did is we stopped and we actually looked at the yellow lights and said, no, this means stop. This means we should not proceed with it. It means that they're not qualified on budget. It means that they're not really serious about Drupal. It means that they're not looking for something that's sort of in our core services. So rather than just sort of glossing over those things, we just stopped doing things with what we deemed kind of yellow lights. And then we learned the power of no, which again was a really powerful moment for us. So we kind of learned the right way to say thanks, but no thanks. We were so afraid of the word no before this. Again, whether it was word of mouth, whether it was an RFP, we just thought, well, if we say no to this one, this is going to be the one that changes the business. And if we don't take the shot, how can we expect to make it? That kind of thing. But we just started carving stuff away. And the change that it had was instantaneous and it was dramatic. So, I'm not going to sit here and say like it wasn't really hard. There are so many times where you're just staring a deal in the face and it's a big budget, or it'd be really exciting, or it'd be cool to have that person's logo, on your logo wall, but you just have to do it. And if you don't commit to it, and if you don't say, all right, we're actually going to say no, it just never happens. It's too easy just to sort of start letting stuff sneak back in. So you always want to make that exception. And when we first started doing this, I kept trying to justify things or kept trying to make exceptions. And when I sat down and talked to the team about it, we just started making hard and fast rules. So there was stuff that we could look at, objectively and say, is it an opportunity of X size, or do they have these things in common with us, or are they, really serious about using Drupal, or whatever the case may be. And that was a way that all of us could kind of just get on the same page versus constantly trying to justify things and kind of find that, that end around or that sort of loophole to kind of sneak something back in. So the effect of that, again, was really amazing. And what we started to do is we actually just started to focus. Our time was spent on opportunities where we actually knew we fit best and we weren't spreading ourselves thin, chasing 100 different deals all at once. So we started to get better, and it was a pretty quick process. We're not perfect by any means. We still focus every day on trying to get better, but what we did was we started to get more focused repetitions on deals that we had a better chance of closing. So our pipeline, if you're measuring it, gets smaller, right? But your close rate goes up dramatically, and our deal size actually went up. Our average deal size went up. So again, just starting to focus made a massive difference. And then, suddenly, things like for example, like our development team will see a pattern, right? So if they start doing sites for a particular type of organization, or they're building the same functionality, or types of integrations, or whatever the case may be, they start to say, oh, we can get a lot better at this, or here's where we can contribute something back, or this might be a cool project for us to do. When you're working with all different kinds of organizations with all different kinds of needs, not to say that people aren't, each project isn't slightly different, but when you start to see those patterns develop is when you start to see characteristics in common with each of your clients. So, design started to see it, user experience started to see it, development, and so that's when we had things that we could really carry forth into the next sales process. So when we identify something and say, we know that, we've done that before, we can use this experience, we start to tell a very different story in the sales process versus just saying, sure, yeah, we can do it. We have some actual insight and knowledge to bring into a sales process. So we got better as a company, and honestly, we learned a lot about ourselves, our strengths, and more importantly, our weaknesses. The second thing we did, which was really important for us, was we started to bring other people into the sales process. So again, when I started, it was really, again, our CEO really off on an island, trying to figure things out on his own and juggling a lot that he had to deal with. And so it was really critical for us to start to have conversations with people outside of sort of a sales role. So what we wanted to do is sort of have key stakeholders from across our agency brought into those conversations early and often. So the first kind of step for us was, okay, rather than, someone pulling actuals from a comparable, build that we've done or project that we've done, we started to, have more conversation around estimates. So how do we bring our technical leadership into every conversation that includes an estimate versus only in these cases or things of a certain scale? Then it was kind of, okay, let's start with doing a brief and bringing in a creative person and technical person and getting them in the room and helping with strategy and how do we figure out the right way to do estimate. Then we started bringing people into the pitch process, and so it just grew over time and sort of had this snowball effect. And after a few months, I mean, probably after 6 months, we realized it was absolutely critical to have both technical and creative leadership involved in basically every step of the sales process. Now that varies, and I think there are right ways to do that and wrong ways to do that, and it's still our responsibility to make sure that we are sort of quarterbacking that process, bringing the right people in, not monopolizing their time, that sort of thing. But what we kind of learned through that is like not people who don't necessarily have their eye on sales all the time, like kind of Brett and I do. Those people saw things to help us qualify that we couldn't necessarily see. And they started to give us insights and actually come up with some fantastic ideas that we brought into the sales process, just getting different perspectives and getting people with different backgrounds. And so that was really helpful. And the other thing that we realized when we started to hear very directly from some of our prospective clients was they liked talking to someone face to face in a pitch process who was actually going to be working on the project or running the team working on the project and that kind of thing. So it just created more transparency and increased sort of that level of communication before someone buys into your organization. So they meet the team and they get to kind of go down the rabbit hole with them. So what was kind of cool for us is people would ask us really heavy technical questions, and we would try to sort of do our best to communicate what we knew, or would say like, let me find out the right answer for that. But when you have your technical director and someone's CTO in a room together and they start to go down the rabbit hole for 20 minutes about a really specific problem that's maybe a roadblock for their business, when you can prove that you have that knowledge and start to sort of give them a slice of what that answer could look like, it gets them thinking about, okay, well, this is what it would be like to work with them. And so those, again, were some sort of watershed moments for us. And part of what we do is we really coordinate as a sales team as we've grown, and we focused a lot on that piece. So rather than a bunch of people, off doing different things, we talk about everything. We have stand-ups every morning. We have a weekly sales meeting. We coordinate weekly with our marketing team, and we talk very specifically about what are we measuring and why. So what are our KPIs? Who are the right contributors in each conversation? How do people work together? If we're going out pitching a particular opportunity or we're targeting specific types of companies, how does that influence the marketing team and that type of thing? So we participate together in conferences. So, here today we have technical leadership as well as, one of our account managers, Lily, who's here. And, we have a lot of people that we try to bring together to have a more holistic approach to things. So it's not just how do you carve out this new piece of business, but it's about how do we put forth the face of the company where everyone's kind of talking about the same thing or demonstrating the right things. We also started looking at reporting and holding ourselves accountable. So before, we basically had no reporting in place other than what's the big number at the end of the year? How much revenue did we do, and what was our profit? So we started breaking that into monthly goals, quarterly goals, yearly goals. We needed to have objective data to look at all the time, and at any single point, you can look at Salesforce, look at our pipeline, and someone can get a pretty good sense of the health of our sales team. So we also wanted to measure success and see what was working, right? It's sometimes hard when everyone's busy and you got a million things going on to really say, like, how are we doing with the projects that we bring in the door, right? Do we feel like they're the right opportunities? Are we measuring profitability on them? That type of thing. And sometimes I think it's really easy to shy away from actually looking at data and leaning into the stuff that may be kind of hard to talk about. So we started forcing ourselves to have those conversations a lot more. I think what we learned about ourselves was incredibly valuable. And what we learned was that if you're not getting better each time, if you're not looking at every single opportunity that you bring in the door and figuring out, well, why did that work? What could we have done better? When we lose opportunities, we take a good hard look at those and say, what did we do wrong here? If you're not getting better each time, it's just you're just gonna be stagnant. And so where we landed and what happened was basically it took us several years, but we figured out that kind of enterprise B2B was our niche, right? Took a lot of reps, took some very, very painful moments, took some bad projects, but also some great successes. But through measuring what projects, again, hit budget, where we were most profitable, who rated our services highly. So we do a net promoter score with each of our clients, and we ask for very direct feedback. And also talking to our internal team. So asking our developers, asking our designers, asking the people who are the boots on the ground in the weeds on every project, what's working and where are we landing, big projects, and where are we feeling that we're the most successful, this is kind of what we figured out. So, there were a lot of different pieces to this, and a lot of things that we had to sort of figure out in order to get here, but basically what we figured out is larger companies with very large technical problems are where we can sort of bring the most value. And so, we like folks with a long B2B sales cycle, they're implementing ABM practices, and of course, like they're very committed to Drupal. So those were just some of the things that we figured out, but this has allowed us to change dramatically, and again, has really influenced our sales pipeline and what we're able to achieve.
Cool. Thanks. This is quite the indestructible podium too, I was noticing. It's kind of interesting. It's very nice. So as we get on to this section of the approach, a little background on me. I've been in kind of the advertising agency world for about 10 years now. Recently joined Elevated Third a little over 7 months ago. So this section of the presentation, I really want to kind of drill down on all the learnings I've been able to soak in, things that worked, things that didn't work. There's no secret sauce to this, by the way. Unfortunately, I wish I had some recipe that you can just pop it right in. It is very unique to your company. These tactics can be applied in many different ways, but hopefully throughout this presentation of this portion, you'll be able to see and feel what it like, that excitement of new business. I mean, for me, I wanted to title this thing "Stay Hungry" because it's something I just love. When you're hungry, you're scratching, you're crawling, you're getting wherever you can to get the business. If you're full, you're on the couch, you're lazy, you're content. I don't really like to be content. I like to stay hungry and go after the goals. And so hopefully that's what you guys will get out of this, and then some sort of like an actionable plan, right? Some steps that say, hey, if I apply these, we might be able to see some growth in this area. So that's what I'd like to kind of focus on here on this section of the approach. Identify your differentiators, right? Everyone, again, is unique. Are you a B2B company, as Harrison mentioned, on the enterprise level in the niche? Are you B2C? Do you like commerce sites? Do you like anything like B2B or B2B to C is kind of like the healthcare insurance, right? It's like we work with them on a B2B basis, but then those providers have to turn around and get the individuals going and move in. So there's a big educational gap between what we would say and what that end consumer says. So, even though it's B2B and B2C, there's always some sort of an end consumer, and understanding that and being very targeted with that allows you to exploit it more than you could, right? When everything is important, nothing really is. So you have to prioritize what your uniqueness is in order to get there. Again, some examples. Do you love banks and financial services, healthcare, those types of items? And especially in the Drupal world, we see a lot of healthcare and financial institutions due to the privacy and kind of personal information being held on Drupal, a lot of nonprofits, and then a lot of higher education. So those are kind of the core suites that we have seen from some of our tools that we do discovery on looking for certain clients and things, and that's where they really fall into. But then it's also like your uniqueness. I mean, as Harrison mentioned, we are a full service digital web development shop. Some are just the digital arm, some just are really good at digital design, and so trying to figure out what really works for you, what you guys are really passionate about is what you need to be kind of identifying as just that marker, and then you got to put the stake in the ground and say, no, this is us. And if you waver from it, then you kind of, you might get some business, some small projects here or there, but it's the core, as Harrison was mentioning, it's the core that's going to really exploit that. Those pieces of business are going to be much more grandiose. You can do project-based stuff, but you start focusing and narrowing down certain target lists, and it works. Is it localization? All the outreach I've done now, it's like, do you have presence in my city? Are you close to me? Can I get to you within 2 hours? I mean, right now everyone is looking to humanize this process. They want that face-to-face interaction. I think we've come a pretty long way with video conferencing, Skype, Zoom, what have you, to get that kind of interaction. But again, if you have that, that's the lowest bearing fruit, right? I mean, if you're in Denver, Colorado, then run havoc on every dang company in Denver, Colorado until you get sick of it and you grow out to Boulder, you grow out to Fort Collins, then all of a sudden Colorado becomes that. And then from there, I'm with the Intermountain region now. And so you do have to start small in order to think big. And what's that relevant experience like? I mean, where do you come from? What are those passions that you have? What really gets you excited? Because that's going to resonate incredibly well with that audience. It's going to resonate incredibly well with those types of organizations that you have identified. Boom, here it is again. Leverage what you know. So and Harrison did touch on this. Is it industry versus solution? But you got to be an expert. So if I love healthcare, if I love healthcare, I just want to destroy the healthcare game. Because I know that each of these types of organizations most likely have a very similar problem. they have the same issues. The people that are assigned in those marketing roles typically are along the same. So as far as meeting people, you're not going to be jumping from industry to industry, because they'll be like, oh, well, you know, people say, it's funny, I've been around in a lot of pitches that people say, oh yeah, you know, I'm an automotive guy and I know I'm pitching this, you know, naked juice over here. And they're like, well, why do you have any business over here in the naked juice pitch? And they're like, oh, well, you know, it's just the fresh thinking and things, you know. And it's funny because that's what everyone says before they get experience in that vertical, right? So once you get experience, then you can't exploit it. So it's really important to hone in on this. Or is it a tech play? Us at Elevated Third, we're preferred partners of Demandbase and have done amazing things to help connect that module to Drupal 8. And so right there, a whole new target list. Anyone that's on Drupal and Demandbase, we have the ability and we have kind of the bulletproof plan to go after them, because we know this space, we created it, and now we're going to exploit it because this is a big issue that these organizations are facing. And so to solve that problem for them and make that connection is what we really, really lean on. Speaking of second bullet point, leaning heavily on research. You have to take time. I mean, there's so many brands out there. There's so many other agencies that are probably going after that as well, that if you don't have anything different to say, if it's just a standard generic email, it's probably not going to resonate. But if I know, again, because of what we're doing and dividing these up, that every healthcare has this problem of X, I'm going to address it in my outreach, you know, right away, because it's a pretty good known fact that these guys are dealing with it versus trying to completely switch it up. And then provide value. And that's just going to be something I don't want to harp on right now because it's kind of reiterated throughout. But before I go on, I did want to ask the audience, like, are you guys, how many of us here, you know, own our own small business and that's why we're kind of here? Okay, we got a couple. And then how many are just part of a sales team and maybe a little bit of a larger organization? Right. And so it becomes tough, you know, I mean, especially those that are starting off wearing too many hats. I see it all the time. I started in LLC probably about 2.5 years ago and ran it for a couple years. And that was my sole purpose, was to join that agency, become that new business arm for them, become remote, because they were just stretched too thin, and there's just no way in hell a CEO can do this incredibly effective and then scale. And that's the issue that a lot of these agencies come across is, hey, I found my differentiator, you know, I'm just the tourism guy in the Intermountain region, so I want nothing but tourism clients, which is great, but then you start getting those clients, and now, you know, you're still the guy that's overseeing all the work and then managing the team, and then before you know it, I forgot about the new business aspect. And so being able to focus a little bit deeper on the division, and that also just comes with a lot of trust, and we'll kind of touch base on those things a little bit down the line. But once we kind of have those targeted lists, then let's just focus on financial. If I worked for Wells Fargo and I was having a hell of a time trying to get another bank, because sometimes banks will say, oh, well, you worked with Wells Fargo. We're not Wells Fargo. We're too small. Or they get intimidated and things like that. So you want to be careful on, you know, leveraging some big names, but being able to break it down and then expand that experience as well. So Stripe, you know, it's a software that allows individuals to receive payments and things like that over the internet. To me, that's a beautiful tangential jump. So I work with financial institutions. I'm going to go after fintech now because I know that those two are related. They probably work with one another. You can go into their MarTech stack and determine what they are using, and that's another in. If I know that they're on Marketo, I might reach out to them and say, hey, I know you're on Marketo, and this isn't really it, but I solved that same problem with another company that uses Marketo. So there's kind of some unique ways here, but that's really what this slide is talking about, is expanding that just beyond, because once you've niched, then you can expand it out. And that's something that I think a lot of times people miss. And sorry, I got a little dry mouth. I woke up with a little sore throat, so what a timely day, but nonetheless. And then, doing the research and tools and integrations that they're currently using to exploit that. Hey, Marketo, we work with Wells Fargo, they work with you, and they have a great relationship. I wanted to talk to you about, this piece of the business and the financial arm for you. And that way you can start the conversation, and you have a little bit of validity behind it, because these are big names, they already use your product, they're sold in, and you kind of complete that triangle, so to speak, for them. The same logic can be applied to the automotive industry. If I work for Audi, and I have that on the roster, I want to change it up, maybe I go after no key in tires, because I know that those are the tires that are used on Audi. So then I have that as a leverage point, or I do an in-car stereo system because I know that that's what's used inside the Audis. And so, these are just another tactic to get you guys brainstorming and thinking a little bit differently on how we can make that jump and still have that connection without being just way out of place in outreach and going after something that you just have no place in doing. Next slide. Cool. What is this? Target. I never really plan things either, guys. Just as a heads up, I like to just kind of talk. So target account list. So this is something now that we know what our kind of verticals are. We know that we can expand out this way. Then we got to really prioritize those. What is most important to you? I like to do kind of a catch-all with parameters. So I want everyone under this, under the automotive space that's within North America. I'm not going to touch too many foreign cars right now. I'm not going to go into the European market or anything. So you can parameter yourself so you don't get overwhelmed, because what's important is to learn from that outreach. What ticked, what didn't tick, how did those meetings go? Did business get closed? Did it not? If not, why? If so, why? Who is that person that you needed to talk to? And always have the dreamers and the whales. I like to call them the narwhals because I think those are just a little bit more unique than a whale. But for me, these also deem a little bit more of a long-term engagement. This is like, asking someone to prom. In sales, we always talk about the courting process. So imagine it's the same exact scenario. I'm going to ask a nice lady out to dinner. That's step one. That's my outbound email. Then if dinner goes well, I might have a second meeting, bring in multiple people from the group, from both teams. We're going to discuss this problem a little bit more. And before you know it, now you're meeting the dad. Now we got a big proposal on the table, and we're trying to get that signature with the ring. So, I've always kind of viewed it as a courting process, and those dreamers and whales are really what that means. And inbound is just such a good testament to you're doing cool shit. It's like you're here, people are seeing you, they've seen the work, whether you're at conferences, whether you get a case study on someone's site, and people finally start hitting you up. Isn't that just the ultimate goal, is to not have to do all this cold outreach and bog yourself down with creating Excel sheets full of lists of companies and contacts within, and when to follow up and when not to follow up. And so the inbound becomes interesting because that almost breaks all the rules. We want to be really finite and niche, but if you got someone knocking on your door with a check, especially as a small startup or a small agency, it's really, really tough to deny, a $100,000 check or a $75,000 check. It's just, let me live for a couple more months. And again, this is going to be your best advocate. That's going to be a lot easier to give if we can get that inbound moving. And so you want to be participating in conferences, and you want to be trying to get your name out there as best you can. But that's kind of how I would, use that target account list to prioritize certain things. Cool. And then, okay, so now we know who the heck we want to go after. We've created all of the lists. We have our prioritized lists and which ones we want and which ones we don't want. Great. Now what do we do? That all seems fine and well, but now the battle's just begun. So now what you have to do is this omni-channel outreach. The top 3 channels right now to engage with anyone. Email is used with about 99% of organizations use email, and that's their number one. Number 2, which is always interesting, is the voicemail and call. Voicemail comes first because most of the time when you do cold calls, no one picks up the phone. So you better get your little speech down on what you want to say in that voicemail, because most likely you're going there. But about 96% of organizations use that as the second tactic. And then social, LinkedIn. With Sales Navigator and LinkedIn in general, you have another touch point there to get a hold of that prospect, to rope them in, to tell them who you are, and make sure that those cadences come in. So if it's an email, hey, I just wanted to see if you were available. I see you're using these things. Again, use that knowledge and research that we've kind of built up. So that's brings purpose to why you're introducing yourself, and that's what's really important to them. And then that voicemail, hey, I sent you an email a couple days ago. Wanted to follow up to see if you did get that email. If so, give me a call back. Here's my number. Social, hey, I've tried hitting you up. Make sure that you always kind of have a reason for what you're doing. We've kind of flipped it on its head sometimes at Elevated Third, and we actually had it happen to our creative director where I forget what product was giving him a call, but he just said, hey, is this Judd? Judd's like, yeah, this is me. Okay, cool. I'm going to send you an email this afternoon. Thanks for your time. Boom. And that way it's just like, Judd's like, oh, well, that was kind of weird. He had me on the phone. But then when that email comes up, he's going to remember it. Oh, gosh, that was Mike from earlier this morning. all right, let me read it for a second. So again, just kind of thinking a little bit differently on how we want to proactively go after the clients is important. A fourth one on the channels of outreach, which I didn't include here, but I want to talk about it, is direct mail. And that used to be almost like foreign. They're like, why would I want direct mail? And I had sent out so many portfolio books and so many little knickknacks. And the scary part there is like you just don't know if they get it. It's like there's nothing tracking, so you can't do this open rate, you can't see any of that type of material, so it's just kind of a shot in the dark. But coincidentally enough, direct mail has gone up from a 0% usage to 40% usage in the last 2 years. So I think people are not getting tired of emails by any stretch, but they're looking for that new, unique way to hit them in a different perspective, and that's what these things are all going to encompass. I mean, email is going to be the steadfast, of course, but what else is curious about the number 2 of voicemail and call is the live call execution is apparently the number 1 challenge in 2019 for sales organizations. They don't know what to say. We're so used to hiding behind a screen, and in sales, what you want to do is you got to humanize that process, make it really relatable for them. And so being able to have a conversation, hear the influctuations of your voice, that's not too easy. I've seen organizations try to use scripts. That's almost like using a robot. I think why people have seen an increase in the voicemail calls and an increase in direct mail is because bots just can do all the automated emails for you. You can set a sequence and no one truly knows if it's me typing it or not. And I'm kind of an old school cat, so I unfortunately still do type out those dang emails, and then I'll get a hit back that says, definitely remove me from your list. Okay, we're not on a list, you're on a list, but it wasn't like an email blast thing. But I think that's just becoming the norm now for outreach, is that people do believe it's just a bot and that it's not a human. So applying these other tactics for outreach gives that person a sense of, okay, this is relatable, I can roll with it, and then test and learn. See what works, see what doesn't work, and optimize from there. I think scripts work really, really well when doing emails. If you find an email subject line that gets a 40-50% open rate, don't mess with that. Keep that stat. That's going to be kind of your Bible moving forward until it doesn't. And if those emails are clicking and getting the meeting set, keep it. That's totally fine. Where you want frameworks is more of kind of that call. Hey, here's generally what needs to be covered on this phone call in order for it to be really successful. But, if I like talking about my 3-legged dog, I'm going to talk about that, because who knows, this person across the room might feel the same. They have a 3-legged dog, and now all of a sudden we find this common ground, and that's all someone wants. They just want to be talked to like they're your friend. They don't want to be talked to or sold to. I mean, they get that stuff way too often during the day. So that's just, anyway. Okay, so there's that slide. Okay, cool. Stand out. Let's talk about a couple ways that we can really make this happen. So as I kind of mentioned, product differentiation is just simply dead. Harrison said it earlier, there's countless different agencies, and number of agencies are only increasing, only making more clutter, only making more noise. The old way, product features. We do this and we do that, and look at us and kind of touting and chest beating. The new way is sales conversations. And sales conversations are what you say, do, and write in the sales process. And so that has now become the new norm. That is now what you want to be focused on when doing outreach, is humanizing it, becoming relatable, and the product features, of course, is just kind of like, what's the advantage of us? But then again, we're talking about us and not really about them. So if you get them on the hook, make sure that stays focused. And again, business, conversation over technology conversations. That's kind of a far out read there. But this kind of plays into this thing called telling the difference. And I like this slide and picture because it's kind of known as like the twinning effect, right? Again, we're very cluttered in the marketplace, who's who isn't who. And this thing is very simple. To us, our differentiators, no brainer. Very easy to spit out, not hard. To them, our prospects, completely different story. They see us as them. They have no idea why we're different than the next shop. Most of the time, maybe they just go down to the bottom line of the budget and say, oh, they're cheaper because everything else stayed the same. So how are we going to break through that twinning effect? How are we going to be the agency or the organization that does separate themselves from looking and acting just like everybody else? And I'll tell you right now, it's not too easy, but it's something that you need to be focused on, because we're so internalized on ourselves and what we can do, and touting all of our cool clients and things, but really everyone's doing that. If someone's not leveraging that, then I'd be fooled. But what I think is really important there after the twinning effect is decrease the time to show value. I did Chicago for obvious reasons, but if Chicago as a city just never existed, and there's this huge plot of land right where Chicago is, what we want to do is decrease the time to show value to the client through giving them value up front. Right now, I see a lot of organizations that will say, all right, the state of Illinois committee, whoever they may be, here's this huge, awesome plot of land we got in Illinois, and it's going to be great. And the first step is, I'm going to block this, aren't I? But the first step is, all right, let's get a road in there. We're going to start with this one road. It's going to cut all the way through. And then these little blue buildings, that's going to be some houses. So we're going to get some people moving to it because now we got these roads to connect them in. And then these gray ones, these are businesses. Now we got corporations coming as part of land that was always blank before. And then we're going to get to this. And everyone's like, gosh, that logic seems fine, Brett. Like, what's wrong with that? Well, it's taken time to show them what that is. So I flip it on its head and say, this empty big old plot of land, that right image, that's what we're going to put there. Then they're like, oh, what? Well, how the hell are you going to do that? And you get to peel back the layers of how you're going to do it, but capture their attention quick, give them value up front, and then allow them to see how your process manifests that's end goal. So this is just kind of a fun little example I like to show because I think it really does resonate true. A lot of times it's, hey Tim, I'm Brett from Elevated Third, and here's my whole blurb, and this is why I'm reaching out. Do you have time for a call? Versus, hey Tim, how you doing? Does Thursday at 3 p.m. work for you for a call? And then, finish the email, and people say, try to avoid, also a little tactic, try to avoid saying, can I get 15 minutes of your time? I know that sounds right. It just comes off really salesy again, so it's more of just kind of saying, hey, are you available at this time? Or I think Dylan's in the room, and he works on our team as well, and he had great success by just saying, hey, I see you're on Drupal, we work in these verticals, let me know if you need any help. That's it. And it's led to some great meetings, and I've done the same tactic as well. And so just kind of thinking about what we think and flipping it on its head and showing that value first is going to be paramount. And then the other thing, too, to speak about automotives, I have a couple of them circled there, and I didn't really know how to animate the slide, so I'll have to just kind of talk about it. But currently, as we go through our pitch decks, we'll have, we worked, and we're just focusing on automotive. Well, we worked with Comcast, we've worked with Home Depot, we've worked with these companies, and then all of a sudden, and let's just say we have one, it's Home Depot and Comcast and Mitsubishi Motors. Then they're like, well, okay, two of the three don't matter to me because I'm an automotive company, and who gives a crap about the other ones? Or they just have, hey, here's the 3 cars that we work with. 3 car manufacturers that we work with in your space, and then that might get a little bit more. But this tactic right here of showing them, hey, Tim, I don't know, my dad's name's Tim, so that's probably why I'm using it as an example. But it's like, hey Tim, these are all your competitors. We work with the ones that are circled, and within that, we have grown our presence of 2 car manufacturers to 5 in the last 18 months. Would you like to talk? Because then it shows validity. Hey, I'm in this space. I'm constantly innovating. Within 18 months, I grabbed more clients. I'm growing this vertical. I'm exploiting this vertical beyond it means, but giving them a glimpse of, oh man, God, those are my competitors. I want to be like them. Or there I am on the list. Why aren't I circled? So there's just different ways of approaching how we've always kind of pitched ourselves in a unique way like this, and just kind of really just laying it out there and showing that growth again and showing that uniqueness for people. Oh yeah, I'm looking at my notes here now, and yeah, it really does. It just grabs their attention quick and establishes the agency as that innovative leader. And I think that's really what we're looking for, because if there is one slide I do want you guys to take a picture of, it would be this one. Understand them and create purpose. If your story describes their problem better than they can describe it themselves, they will automatically assume you have the best solution. Yeah. Here we go. But that is super powerful. If you can bring to the table, through all these targeted lists that we talked about, through narrowing down, the niches, to building out everything, and we had to take time to research. And that's not an easy portion. A lot of times, like, oh, cool, I got the marketing director's email and number, boom, let's fire it off. But if you could take an hour and a half, per client, per account, and actually do some research. Figure them out. Figure out what could be ailing them. And sure, sometimes people have asked me, well, what happens if it doesn't work? Is that scalable to be having resources spend an hour and a half per account to do this? And I would say, damn right it is. Because it will take you twice as long to lose a deal than it does to win one. The ones that click, they click because you've done this. The ones that seem to be dragging on, I mean, I always will have ones that just drag on for months and months. And at a certain point, just send them the dang breakup email. Hey, I've been chasing you around for a while. It seems like this isn't going to be a high enough priority on your list. I really thought this would be a great working relationship, but timing just isn't aligned. So, thank you so much for your time and let me know. And I've had friends at other agencies say that they've gone 3 months blank from a client and they send them that breakup email. Within an hour, they get, oh, I'm sorry, we were just really busy, because the ball's always in their court. And now you're like, you know what? I'm so done chasing you. Like, this is just ridiculous. So I'm just going to send you the breakup email. And then they're like, oh, well, no, we are serious now. And it's funny how they'll just kind of think a little bit differently if you hit them with a little different tactic. But research is just the paramount way to cut through the clutter. And on average, oh yeah, I did say that. Sweet. Sometimes I take notes and then I just kind of roll with it, and they're just like, oh, nailed it. This is something too that will be applied to the organization of, building your team. We just mentioned that there's a lot of business owners and things like this in the room that are wearing all the hats, and it's going to be kind of like, oh gosh, who do I hire then? If I'm going to try to carve out this department or dedicate resources and time to this, who's it going to be? So, I say make the right hires. They are the front line of the agency, right? We are the first interaction a client can possibly have with our process, with our agency. If I'm 2-3 hours late on a simple email back, that sets the precedent of what that organization will assume happens if in the door of our agency, because I'm the first interaction. Harrison's the first interaction. So it's speed to lead, it's getting to them quick, because we are the front line. We want to be personable, we want to get out there quick, we want to say hello. If you got to fly and jump on a plane to go somewhere, which we often do, which honestly is tiring as hell. But clients remember that. Man, what was that one group that flew out here for us? And even though the project is now, 3 months down the line, who was that again? I'm going to give them a call. They took the time. They went out and saw me first. And so think about when you make these hires, who do you want that handshake to be? Who do you want that first interaction to be with? And make sure that person is really well equipped to do it. To be well equipped, you got to have a good baseline knowledge. They came from the advertising world to a Drupal specific shop. Those could not be any different. We're using Tim again. And if I hit up Tim prior in my career, I'd say, hey, Tim, what's going on? What do you want us to do? And they're like, well, what would you do for us? And I'm like, well, shoot, I could do a website, I could do a TV commercial, I could do print, I could do logo, I could do packaging, I could do all this stuff. So it was a lot harder for me to kind of focus on what I could. Now, I know for a fact I'm only building websites and I'm only using the Drupal CMS. So therefore, having that intimate product knowledge is just a way quicker process. Hey, you're on Sitecore, cool, man. If you want to switch, let me know later. Otherwise, I'm not worrying about you. I think it'd be fun to build cases to say Drupal dominates Sitecore, Drupal dominates WordPress, and be able to go after those. It's a little far off for right now. I think we still got a great pool of Drupal clients that we want to be focused on, but you want that person to be competent enough to scratch the surface across all departments and the service offerings of the agency to get that done. If you can't send someone out, they'll read through the bullshit. If you try to ask me a tech question and it's too deep of knowledge for me, I will tell you I do not know. But I know our technical director does. I know our development director does. So let me get him on the next call. We're going to keep that momentum going. And then make sure it's a culture fit. The salespeople, they're usually kind of out there and a little bit loud. But we want to be part of the team too, and I think sometimes we fall flat because we don't get to work on the project. We just work on the coding and we get it in, and then all of a sudden, we kind of lose out on the fun stuff. But being able to get that culture fit of the agency that's like, oh, you know what, I am going to jump on that grenade for Brett, because in sales, we don't know when that RFP is going to come down the line. We don't know when we're going to have to hop on a plane. So to have a team around us and a good culture fit to say, hey, Tim, do you mind jumping in on this call real quick? I know it just happened, but I need you here for this. And every time our team's like, absolutely. That's not going to be a problem, because we know that our abilities are only so far. We are our own department. And if we weren't, we could do everything, we'd probably run our own business, right? We wouldn't have to work for an agency, but because we don't and that we've specialized into these crafts is where that culture fit comes in. So this kind of plays into it too, and I know Harrison touched on it as well. But treat it the same as your account team. Treat it the same as your creative team or your ops team. Mix it up. I think as a salesperson, you have to have a very good baseline knowledge of how every single department in your organization works and how they interact together and how that process falls in when a project does come in from a client. Because they'll ask, okay, well, how's this work? Oh, well, I know for sure that we use these project management tools, and you'll be assigned an account manager with the coordinator underneath, and we'll always have a lead developer. So getting that understanding of kind of how the agency works is just going to allow your client to get the answers or their questions answered a lot quicker so that you can get to the next phase of the sales process. And again, and I think also engagement during the entire process. Once the deal is signed, it's like almost just begun, because for me, they usually just want a little taste of the lemonade. You know, no one's just going to give you their whole piece of business right off the bat. They might say, hey, I need some maintenance work at 20 to 40 hours a month. Great. You take that all day and you work it and you grow it organically. Or, hey, I just have this small project on this one part of my site, and then you grow that into trying to take over like the main.com. Maybe it's the help site. Maybe it's another section of the site that you can bite into and then try to grow that organically. So it's important to keep the salespeople in that cycle as well. So during the process and duration of a project, you know, we work with the account team to jump into those check-in meetings and say and ask the client, hey, how you guys doing? You know, and Harrison and I will hit them up and say, hey, let's go grab some lunch. We just want to like take you unbiasedly outside of like the agency world now, and let's go grab a bite and see how it's going. You know, are there things that you want to be working on or things that you think that could improve? So we always want to be the advocate because we've established that trust with the client. And that's the main thing, is that they trust us and they don't really like to, you know, have the whole bait and switch. So there's that. I'll kind of do this. Happy workers work harder. Implement incentives. We're salespeople. You know, you want us doing research at 8 p.m. at night? Give me a reason why. You want me to slave and fly across the country for certain things? Give me a reason why. Otherwise, it's not going to be that insightful for me, and the incentives are great, whether it's, hey, you close a client within this range, here's X spot bonus, or this range, here's a bigger spot bonus, or you do a commission structure, or you do whatever you can to keep these guys hungry, right? Keep them motivated, keep them moving, keep them learning and trying to go after it, because sometimes if they just get a deal and the company just grabbed, I mean, I came across this all the time. I grabbed an agency like $3.2 million in 3 years. I didn't see a dime of it. They just gave me like a little extra raise on the salary bonus, and I was too young to really kind of stand up for myself, so to speak. But then afterwards, I was like, yeah, that CEO's Maserati looks pretty sweet. Why am I still written in a studio? You know, like how did this flip-flop back and forth? So, and that's why I ultimately left, because I didn't feel like the roadmap was sufficient enough for me to keep working and churning as hard as I did. So you want to be able to identify that roadmap. It is a team effort, and make sure that you get to implement some incentives to keep these guys and gals just moving and always wanting to stay hungry. And then, I mean, I'll be quick on this one. This one isn't really that freaking cool, but you got to kind of make the investment too, whether it's a hire and that's a salary cost. Again, salespeople, we are an internal cost to organizations. Unfortunately, we're not billable. So, I mean, the pressures are on quick when you do make that hire, but make sure that, again, you make the right hire with the right product knowledge, that there isn't 6 months down the road and Brett failed and now I'm out X number of dollars and got to go through this whole rehiring again. So that's a really critical part, is getting people with some experience and understanding it's going to cost some. These are a couple of the tools we're actually talking with Outreach. It's really kind of like an email automated sequence system and things, but these are some of the tools that we use at Elevated Third, which has just really made our lives tremendously easier. Being able to look at Discover.org and getting the right contacts information, email address, those sorts of things. And there's many services out there like that, Salesforce to keep the pipeline moving and everything else. And then, of course, you know, make these investments in the conferences, shaking hands with you guys, having these conversations. I mean, this is what makes that networking. There's a lot of areas of ways to get business and things. So I think with that said, we can open it up. We got, about 7 minutes left? Sweet. If you guys have any questions and things, yeah, right on.
So you've identified your industries, your verticals that you like to pursue, right? And you had either your local area or these regions that you're focused on. Where in that formula do you factor in sort of your internal team's capacity to the sales process? So do you pull back if you feel like, okay, we know that these are clients we want to work with, or is it all just full steam ahead and we'll figure out the staffing this week.
I can talk about that a little bit. Yeah, so we have...
Can you repeat it or like summarize it?
Yep.
Yeah. So essentially the question is like if we're getting redlined on capacity, what do we do and how do we decide if we're going to pull back from something? Is that fair?
Yeah, like how does your team's ability to meet the demands factor into your sales process?
Absolutely. So the way that our team is structured is we have key leadership that are all identified with a particular team, and one of our teams is focused on delivery. So our development director and our account director are tasked with meeting every single week and planning out our resources and figuring out who's dedicated to what and what can we take on, and also what then deems a new hire. Like what threshold for us means we need to go out and hire more folks. So we never want to pull back from an opportunity. If we think something is well qualified and think that we have an opportunity to win, we never say we're not going to pursue something because we don't have the bodies today. What we do is we bring that to our team and say, hey, just so you know, we're involved in a process right now. This is how we scoped it out. It would be this many people for this long. How do we either move things around internally and shift resources to make that happen, or how do we get to a place where we can hire fast enough to get the right people in the door? I as a salesperson, get incredibly nervous when you don't pursue something, and I think that it's a very delicate balance, and it requires a lot of planning, and it requires a lot of work on our end, but everything is mapped out in a tool that we use that shows every single billable resource we have, and it shows them in both a short-term and a long-term perspective.
How big is your agency, or what you are referring to as if you go after a big whale, right, and you don't have possibly the resources currently, but you still want to pitch? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah. It's just that idea of you're being selective as you grow the type of clients you pursue. But if you still see like, okay, these are all clients I want to pursue, but we're really already busy, I'm just curious what your take on that was.
I mean, there's a couple things. A, fake it till you make it to a certain degree. I mean, pitch it like you have that already staffed, and then figure out the pieces later, whether you have to grab a contractor for a couple months or whatever, or make sure you have that HR department or whoever is going to be the hiring manager. If we know we're going after these types of clients that we're revving up for Q2, maybe we're doing interviews right now, right? So that if this thing drops, we know I got this team, and then it's kind of that bulletproof for you to tell the client, hey, this is going to be you're going to be our baby client, and if you guys are able to jump on board, this is going to be the dedicated team. But I think organizations also understand that some people just aren't going to be able to have these resources sitting around waiting for them to come along. Yeah. Right.
And we have a stand-up every single morning with all of our different teams' leadership so that I can say, hey, we're in this opportunity right now, this is going to happen or may not happen, but I get it on the radar right away. So, hey, we're having a conversation with so-and-so company. Yep. It may take 6 months, but we're having this conversation now so you guys know, versus just like, oh, by the way, we closed this piece of business yesterday, now we got to figure it out. I think doing it early and often helps.
Yep.
I'm ignoring my own advice right now, actually, but trying to incentivize your clients in some way to work with you on this, but like delay the start of the project. Say we're going to secure your place in the queue, and if we can start this, we'll have all our ducks in a row in 2 months or whatever it may be to start this. It doesn't work with everybody, but we've had some success in the past.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Any other questions? Sure.
I've got a half-formed question.
Okay.
So when it comes to estimates for clients, common wisdom, so to speak, is like small, medium, large. That way they've got one to kind of like react to, like, no, I don't want to spend that, but that's too little. When we're doing those kinds of, the Three Little Bears estimate, when you estimate, is it just progressively more stuff whenever you estimate? Or is it actually 3 distinct approaches that each have their own value set in the approach?
Yeah, it would be the latter, and I would also encourage you to not give them multiple options.
Okay.
What that sometimes does come off to them is, I don't know what I'm doing, so therefore here's everything to look at. What we've done at times is, this is what we know is either going to be mission critical. So to the latter point of your statement there, this is what's mission critical to get things up and running. Yeah. This is that base price. And then think about it not necessarily in 1, 2, 3 up front. Here's phase 2 of the project. After 12 months, this is what we want to do on phase 2. Keep them around because that's going to be the lowest bearing fruit. So kind of phase it out as here's phase 1, here's phase 2, here's some optional, the cherries on top sort of a thing. I mean, would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're trying to bring is show that we've done the thinking and we have value. So if they say just throw me a wild number, I want to come back with, okay, well, here's what we think and why. I think to Brett's point, just to add to it, sometimes it can just sort of all blend into one, and why would I not just go with the cheapest one? But when we can say, okay, here's how we scoped this out, here's what you get, here's what you don't get, that kind of stuff, it shows that we're opinionated, and I think it helps to set us apart.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions? Okay. Well, guys, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.